Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel UFO World. I'm your host Laszlo. Today I had the pleasure of speaking to Grant Cameron, who's a UFO researcher and author who's been researching the topic for a long time now. He has written over 20 books with more currently being worked on. Grant is a big advocate of the consciousness elements, paranormal and spiritual side of things, and this comes from his own first-hand experiences as well. Today we have a fascinating conversation. Honestly, it is so insightful and it really helped me answer some of my own questions as well about my own experiences. We discussed the consciousness elements, the wow phenomena, the meaning of dreams and abduction experiences, synchronicities, what these intelligent beings' motivations could be, UFO craft, and loads more. Do check out Grant Cameron's work. It is all invaluable content. All the links will be in the description. I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And as always, please do like, comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. With that being said, let's dive in. Hello, Grant. How are you today?
Just doing fine. How about yourself?
I am well. I'm well. It's afternoon here. It's morning for you, right?
Yes. Not early morning, but it's morning. Yeah.
Yeah, not too early. Nothing too crazy. Great to have you on the show today. Appreciate you coming on board. Big fan of your work and your contributions to the space as well. So wow. Fantastic to have you on. Yeah, look, obviously you're well renowned within the UFO subject already. So we can just dive into this straight away, just for people who may not be fully aware or how you got into the UFO subject. Grant, do you mind giving what was the moment for you where you was like, wait a minute, this is interesting, I need to kind of look into this more? Was there a particular thing that happened, or a scenario?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It was May of 1975. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which is right in the middle of Canada. It's the coldest major city in the world, and about 35 miles southwest towards the US border, there's a small town called Carman. They were having very frequent sightings. It started in February of 1975. And I told my friend, I said, well, we used to drive around the city. We were about 21 at the time. And just do nothing, just drive around. And I said, well, instead of driving around the city, why don't we go and see what everybody's looking at? And I had no interest in UFOs. I don't think I'd ever thought about it. But so we didn't go. We just sort of forgot about it again. And it was May of 1975. And there was a TV crew here in Winnipeg that was out there trying to film. There was a couple of TV networks that were out there trying to catch this thing on camera. And what happened was they got it on camera. And if you know the Nimitz story where the UFO goes from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second, they got it going the other way. They got it going from ground level to 5,000 feet in 3 frames of film. So 1/8 of a second, it went from ground level to 5,000 feet in the air. And they had a crew out there. It was a volunteer crew. The producer had said, no more UFOs. I'm not paying any more overtime. This is absolute nonsense. You guys want to go, you can go on your own. So the guy who was actually filming it was not a cameraman. He was a film editor in the studio. And he had this big TV camera, and the thing was on the ground, and they went and they sent 2 cars, one north of it, one south of it. And the one car actually got within maybe quarter of a mile, maybe less than that. And the thing was sitting on the ground like a movie screen, an old drive-in movie screen, but it wasn't touching the ground, blood red. And it jumped up in the air. That's when this guy caught it. He was 8.25 miles away, and he had the camera, and he was watching this thing go up and go down. It was glowing up and it would glow down. And he knew that they'd almost got it on camera the night before. So he said, well, next time it glows up, I'm gonna shoot. And it was almost like the UFO said, are you ready? You ready to shoot? And he pushed the trigger, and the thing jumped into the air, and then it flew across the sky. And so this thing went viral in Winnipeg, and they were playing it one frame at a time. And they were showing this, there was echoes in the frame. There was actually 7 objects in the main object, and then 5 or 6 echoes in behind it, and it was bobbing up and down, and it was you could tell it was rotating because it was pulsing, it was rotating. Just the most bizarre thing. And I remember seeing this, and I went, wow, come on, let's go see this. Let's go see what they're looking at. Yeah. And as I always describe it, I said it was like buying the lottery ticket. You buy the lottery ticket, there's a chance you're going to win, but you're not going to win. And so we went out there. We didn't see anything. We were driving around for about an hour in the town, out of this town of about 2,000 people. And after about an hour, my friend said, Okay, we'll go back into town one more time. If we don't see anything, let's go home. So, okay, great. This has been a waste of time. Total waste of time. Turned the car to go back in, and it appeared from the left to the right. It was down very low. Nobody, as we were driving around saying, I said, what is everybody looking at? What's everybody, like we're looking at stars and planets and going, like, whatever they're looking at isn't very impressive. But when it came, nobody said, is that what they're looking at? Everybody just went, there it is. It's just so weird. And it was down low, a couple of 100 feet off the ground, if that. And it was pulsing. It was red. It looked like it was alive. It was like a plasma type object. And it flew right in front of the car, flew down right in front of right across the road in front of us as we were heading west. And I remember I was getting out of the car. The car was still sort of moving as we were trying to get out of the car, because it was going in behind a bunch of school buses that they had parked outside of the town. And I knew it was going to go in behind these school buses because it was so low, and I wanted to see this thing. And then I remember getting to the school buses and watching this thing just slowly pulsing. It was just flying away. So I dragged all my friends out 2 nights later. I said, you got to see this thing. This is the most amazing thing you'll ever see in your life. And after an hour, they said, we're going home. I said, no, you got to see this. This is amazing, man. If you see this, it'll change your life. Yeah. No. And I remember they said, no, Grant, we're hungry. We're going back to Winnipeg for pizza. Okay, fine. So they all took off. And there was about 25 people. There's people all over the place trying to see this thing, all over the countryside during this period of time. And there was 25 people when this thing started where we were. And it was just in the middle of some road. It was nothing there outside of the town. And when it was finally came, there was 8 people. And I remember we were on the one side, and these kids were in the field, and that we had brought their young kids that were, interested, that lived on the street. And the thing flashed, and the one kid said, is that it? And I go, yeah, I guess so. I saw it flash, and I go, that's not what I saw the first night. But then it flashed again. It flashed, and it was jumping around the sky. It was called the bouncing ping pong ball, and this thing would jump. It's bouncing all over the sky. And as it came in closer, it sort of the bounces got closer and closer together. And then as it got in really close, then it was the same thing I'd seen the first night. It was this red plasma type object, except it had a green glow on the back of it, and it flew sort of right at me. They made this turn and sort of headed northwest, back sort of towards the direction it came from the west and went back into the northwest. And it was years later, I'm thinking to myself, and when I was looking at it, I said, man, that's probably like some extraterrestrial planet. Like, this is so wild. It's like being in the Bible, seeing some miracle or something. I was just so impressed. And it was flying away, and the car beside us, I remember, because it was bouncing around in the sky, there was a girl in the car who couldn't see it. There was 3 guys. There was a courier car where they deliver stuff to offices and stuff. And there's 3 guys and a girl, and the guy had a Nikon motor drive camera, which people would know it is today, but they had developed 35 millimeter film, and then they developed a motor drive that would advance the film, so you could just click, click, click. You didn't have to keep advancing the film with your hand. And he had this motor drive on this thing, and I don't know how many frames he had, 24, 36, or whatever. So as it was coming in, people were yelling and screaming and swearing. It was like being at a big soccer game, and the team is about to score or something like that. It was just intense moment. And I remember the girl was crying. She couldn't see it. I can't see it. Someone show it to me. I can't see it. Because it was bouncing around the sky. And this guy had the camera, and he had it poised on top of the car. And I could just remember hear this click, zzz, click, zzz, click, zzz, click, zzz, as he's unloading the camera as this thing's coming at us. And so that was sort of how it started for me. And I got infatuated with it. I thought, wow, this is a $1 million story. I'm going to be famous. I'm going to, and I was going to go and interview all the people, because the story was, well, in the high school, I'd done a poll at the high school, a lecture at the high school, and 59% of the kids at the high school said that in the last 2 years, they'd seen something unidentified. So it was a very high percentage of people in this town were seeing this. Nobody wanted to talk about it, because there was one particular couple that was totally ostracized. They had all sorts of stuff going around about their farm. They lost 32 horses, and it was just a real nightmare for them. And nobody wanted to talk to them. And what I discovered was everybody was seeing the same thing, but nobody wanted to become, their name was the Lehmans. Nobody wanted to be the Lehmans. And so I went in, I interviewed a whole bunch of people, including the guy who owned the airport, who's just died a month ago. And he was the tour guide. He was taking the TV crews out there and stuff. And I think he's told me he had 150 sightings. And I had maybe 50 in 2 years. So for 2 years, that's all I did. I went out there and every night, every second night, and I interviewed people and I tried to film this thing. And then there was these objects on the ground, which now people call orbs. These things are sitting on the ground. We were filming those. And I went to the local publisher. I tried to get the manuscript published. And Toronto is the big place in Canada where you publish manuscripts. And I got one reading, but nobody was really seemed to all that interested. But the local publisher should have been interested because it was a big story. And I remember the rejection letter she gave me was, "Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers." And that's what my, and I went, wow. So from that day on, I never was interested in sightings. I just said sightings are things you can tell your grandchildren when you grow old and gray. Doesn't really matter what I see. Didn't matter what I saw. Who cares? It was just exciting. And I was trying to figure out what's the deal. Like somebody has to know what's going on here. Somebody has to know what this thing is. So I started this investigation. There was a synchronicity. There was a guy in my father's office. My father was a pilot for the Canadian government, for the Department of Transport. And there was a guy in his office who had a sighting. His name was Ernie Epp. My father said, "Ernie wants to tell you about his sighting." So I went there and he was telling me about this sighting, and it was really nothing. It was just, light in the sky type thing. And then he said, "If you really want to know what's going on with UFOs, you should investigate what the Canadians were doing back in the 1950s. And I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah, I worked for them." I said, "You did?" It's like, "Wow, you did." It's like the synchronicity, bizarre synchronicity. And he said, "Yeah." And he told me about Wilbur Smith, who ran was called Project Magnet. He said he was the smartest engineer I ever met in my life. But he was totally crazy. He was talking to the aliens were landing in his backyard, and he was talking to them. And I went, "What are you talking about?" And I went there, and he had died in 62, but his wife in 77, I guess I went there, was still alive. And I went to talk to her, and it was basically true. She was talking about this alpha alien that she talked about it like there was the family pet. It was like just unbelievable. We were driving to her son's house where they had hidden the files. They had all the files, and the Canadians, the Russians, and the Americans were all trying to get the files. And she had hidden the files at her son's house. So we were going to her son's house. And she was talking about alpha this and alpha that and all these bizarre stories about the contacts that they had and stuff like that. I thought, wow, this is really weird. So then I investigated that, and I figured, well, that was sort of the answer. And the Canadians did have the answer. They had from the American government, they had written a top secret memo. Wilbur Smith was a head of radio communications for the Department of Transport. So the main radio guy in Canada. And he had set up these radio communications and stuff like that. And he had gone to the United States, and he said, where there's smoke, there's got to be fire. So he went and he was he was negotiating FM radio frequencies with the American government, who gets which frequencies. And he had controlled all the intelligence channels and stuff like that. And he went and he asked about UFOs, and they said, "Yeah, this is for real." So he wrote out what was called the top secret memo. It's probably the most important document, I think, that's in ufology. The Canadian government does not deny this document exists. It's in the Canadian government archives, and we call it the Smith top secret memo. And it was written in November of 1950. And Wilbur Smith said, "I made discreet inquiries with American officials, like not people on the street or secretaries, officials. And I was told the following things. Number one, flying saucers exist. Number two, the subject is the most highly classified subject in the United States, rated 2 points higher than the hydrogen bomb, which wouldn't be developed until 1952. Then he said the subject is of tremendous significance to the Americans, and they have a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush who are trying to figure out what's going on." And then he made the thing that would later in my life be very important, and that was, he said, "We were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the phenomena, such as mental phenomena." And the Americans aren't doing very well because they've said if we're working on the problem, they're willing to exchange credentials with us and talk about it. So they were willing to work together on this problem of this mental phenomena thing. So that's where it sort of started for me, and that led to the highest level official, except for Eric Davis talked to 2 presidents, but other than that, this was the highest level official that we got, and he was Dr. Eric Walker, who was the former president of Penn State University. Had 14 honorary doctorate degrees, was an advisor to President Eisenhower on engineering education, and most importantly, he was the chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, which is the top military think tank in the United States for the Pentagon. And by trying to figure out who was Wilbur Smith talking to in the United States, somebody outed him. They said he's the guy. He attended these set of briefings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1950 with the bodies and the crafts. He's very arrogant. He thought he knew everything. He went to all the meetings. And then we started this about an 8-year sort of chasing him around. And he was talking in rhymes and riddles and telling us to go investigate something else and talking about the mental phenomena. And that led to me going to the president. So he had said that his files, some of his files were going to be at the Truman Library. So we were looking for his files when he was at the Pentagon, because he was executive director of the Research and Development Board, which is the agency inside the Pentagon that creates weapons. Mm-hmm. So he was the second in command there. And these files, it sounded like he was going to hand them off to the Truman Library. So I went to the Truman Library looking for these files. And there was a couple of letters that dealt with Walker, but really nothing UFO related or whatever. And it was at that point I said to the archivist, I said, hey, so what do you got on UFOs? Because I figured, like, well, the president is the most powerful guy in the world. Like, he's got to know what's going on. So I said to the guy, I said, well, what do you got on UFOs? And he said, well, we got, if you remember the story, in 1952, there was Truman gave the shoot down order. Yeah. In July of 1952. And all these telegrams came into the White House asking the president not to shoot this thing down. So they had maybe 20 of these telegrams and maybe one other document. And I go, that's it? That's all you got? And he said, yeah, that's all I got. And I go, that's kind of weird. And then, so they're right down the road, maybe 2 hours down the road in Kansas is the Eisenhower Library. So I go, oh, I'll go to the Eisenhower Library. I'll find out what they know. So I went to Eisenhower Library, and it was very official. You had to, sort of talk to them before you're allowed to research there. And so I told them what my subject was. And then when I got there, they pulled these 5 documents for me. And I said, 5 documents? That's all you got? And one was the famous Robertson panel report, the CIA report. That was it was actually done under Truman, but it was at the very end of the Truman administration. And the document ended up in the Eisenhower Library. Said that they had a telegram from one of the contactees. And then I said, that's it? And the guy said, that's it. And then I said, well, how many pages you got here? And he said, 28 million pages. And I went, something's wrong here. And that made me this pursuit to go presidential library and find out which presidents had sightings, what documents they had, what comments they'd made on UFOs. And then that really, again, it wasn't really going anywhere. It was sort of like there was no documents in the presidential libraries. And it was like, oh, they're covering up. They're not telling them, or they're telling them and it's off the record, because Truman had actually brought in the air advisor in 1948, and he had told him he wanted an oral briefing every 3 months. So that was one of the possibilities that the president knows, but they're never going to put the thing on paper. Yeah. And that's where it led to 2012. I'm sort of going along and just sort of collecting stories like everybody else, on cover up and who's covering it up and this sort of stuff. And that was when I was watching Colin Andrews, and he was lecturing on crop circles and consciousness. And I wasn't interested in crop circles. I couldn't have cared less. And I was at what's called the World UFO Congress. And it's a thing that goes from 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. You don't go to all the lectures because, you got to eat and you got to visit with people and whatever. So it was one of these lectures where I go, I'm not really into crop circles. I don't know if I'm going to go in there. And then there was this big controversy because Colin Andrews had come out and said that 80% of the crop circles were hoaxed. And it was a major controversy. It was like everybody wanted to kill a guy, They were just furious that he had said this. It's like, oh, there's this big controversy. I've never seen the guy lecture. He's a major figure. And I'll go in and see what he says. So I went into the lecture and I zoned out. So, and that's what I call a contact modality. If you want to get in the field, there's various things you can do: hypnosis, psychedelics, trauma, and one of them is daydreaming. It's just sort of shutting your left brain down. And that's what happened. I was sitting there. I wasn't really paying attention to him. I was just sitting there, and he's talking about consciousness circles. And all of a sudden, this sort of came in my mind, three particular items, and it said, "This is how it works. This is the whole deal. It's consciousness." And the one thing they'd given me was the thing with the top secret memo. That it sort of popped in my head, and it was where it said mental phenomena is involved. And then the other one was let me think. I'm blanking on the other 2 items, but anyway, there's just 3 items that popped in my head all at the same time, and it was like it came with absolute certainty. It said, "This is what it's about," And as I make the joke, I mean, in 2012, I couldn't have spelled consciousness. I couldn't have cared less. I didn't know what it was. It was just, this is consciousness. This is what this is about. It's consciousness. And I was really excited. And then as it went on the next couple of years, it was almost like the pieces sort of got fit into this puzzle about consciousness. I learned a little bit more and a little bit more, and it became more and more apparent that's what the whole thing's about. It's not as physical as people think. Well, that's my conclusion. It's not as physical as people think. It's much more psychic or spiritual than people think, and it's 1,000 times more complex than people think. And it won't have a hint of capitalism in it. Those are the four things that I've sort of come to the conclusion as to what this phenomenon is. And I call it the intelligence. So I'm not really that sure it's ET, because it's all consciousness. Everything is consciousness. You got to remember who you actually are. You are not the puppet. You are a puppet. You are playing a puppet on a stage, and you are actually behind the whole phenomena. So the whole thing is it's this consciousness thing, as Max Planck, the quantum physicist, said. Consciousness is primary. Nothing gets behind consciousness. So it all begins with consciousness. Everything's built out of consciousness. And so they may be playing aliens. We're pretending to be humans, and we're all playing these little stage plays. And because you played King Henry VIII in grade 12 high school, doesn't mean you're King Henry VIII. You're not King Henry VIII. You were playing King Henry VIII. And that's what I sort of come to the conclusion. So they are definitely pretending they're aliens, or they're coming across as spirit guides or these different things. But it's all about lessons, and it's about us, I think, in the end, learning what is actual reality. Not so much we get hung up on the UFOs and the sightings and stuff like that. And I'll give you the one last example, and then you can go on. But one of the things that people will always talk about is they're out doing sky watches, and now these three objects came and they made a triangle in the sky. Or people will say, "Man, I was watching and the thing was flying along and it suddenly did a right-hand turn," and they go, "Wow, man, I wonder how it does that." And that's not the question. The question is, why would you come 1,000 or 10,000 light years across the universe to make a damn triangle in the sky? Or why are you making 90-degree turns? There is no reason in the world you need to do a 90-degree turn. And what they're doing is what I call the theory of wow. They're just trying to get you to go, wow, what the heck is going on? It's called shattering naive reality. So they do these really weird things, almost like Jesus. You walk on water, you feed 5,000 people, because you got to do the circus first. You got to get people's attention, then you deliver the message. And so that's sort of sums up my 49 years of chasing this phenomena around, where now it's sort of like trying to figure out what is reality, what are we perceiving that's wrong, and how they are sort of dragging us down the road to show us how reality actually works.
Wow. Well, you've summed it up, and I mean, I was watching some of your stuff before, especially the WoW phenomena as well, and I think I've been. I mean, firstly, by the way, just to a couple of points. You mentioned about you zoning out or you not wanting to go to that conference. I found out, because I've had my own experiences. They've been more within the paranormal side of things. I haven't actually. I think maybe I saw a physical craft once, but it's been more. I mean, I've done a diary. The last 4 months, I've had about 7 weird, strange dreams, all very similar as well. And I've been thinking out, what is the point of it? Like, why? It's like they're playing games or something like that. But the things I've realized as well is the things I don't want to go to, like you didn't want to go to that event. They seem to be the things that catch you off guard when you're just there zoning out, as you said, and then something happens or you get a download and kind of pops up into you, and then you get synchronicity as well. And it's really strange. But the WoW phenomena itself, that it is something intelligent, kind of create curiosity, because that's when I tell people about this as well. I say to them, I didn't wake up one day believing in this stuff, right? Stuff has happened and it's caused me to be like, well, this is strange. That's going against everything I thought was true. And it makes you want to wonder and dig deeper. And that's the only thing I can think of it's doing. And I don't really, as you probably didn't know at the time as well, you're just going down a pathway and then stuff just pops up and it feels like you're being pulled towards something. So everything you've said sounds like it. I don't like using the word preordained, but it definitely feels like there's something there which is leading you towards something. I don't know what the end goal is. There's obviously I've got some theories around it as well. I mean, from your experience, what do you think is probably going to be like, why are they doing this? I mean, obviously they're getting us to kind of dig deeper and stuff like that. But do you have a theory on why they might be doing this?
I think I have a good idea. If you've ever interviewed Mike Cleland, if you haven't, you should interview him.
Okay.
Mike Cleland is the owl guy. So Mike Cleland got
yeah.
obsessed with owls. So he wrote 2 books on owls. So 2 days before he started the first owl book, he's getting regressed by Yvonne Smith, who's a regressionist in Los Angeles. And he wants to go back and review an incident where he is coming back from the same conference that I saw Colin Andrews lecture at. He's coming through Utah, and he's an outdoor guy. So he just takes a sleeping bag and he sits in the middle of the desert, and he's sleeping on the side of the road. Wakes up in the middle of the night and he sees this, looks like a UFO, round UFO with lights all around it, up on top of a hill. And he goes, oh, that looks like a UFO. And then he just goes back to sleep again. And next thing he knows, he's out of his body. He's floating above his body. He's above the craft. And suddenly he's in the craft. And he talks about this fact. There's these small grays. And Mike's, he's not really tall, but he's tall. He's taller than I am. He's 6 foot tall, maybe a little bit more. And he said it was like he jumped into this gray suit, just into this gray suit. And he said he looked at his hands, and he's a gray. And he's looking at these grays beside him, and they're walking down this hall. And they take him into this room, and he said it looked like a cheap hotel in Indiana. He said it had this dirty carpeting, had this wooden table, and these beings are all sitting behind this table. And he couldn't see their faces. Their faces were sort of blacked out, or you couldn't see the faces. But these beings were there. And he said, well, why am I here? And they said, it's time. And he said, time for what? And then they said, and he's whispering, like he's under regression, so he's whispering. And they said, it's time. What do you mean it's time? And then they said, you volunteered for this. And he went, volunteered for what? And all of a sudden it came in his mind. Oh, he suddenly remembered. And he started swearing at them. Oh, F this and F the. You never told me it was going to be this tough. You never told me it was going to be this lonely. And he's yelling at these beings like, I never realized it was going to be like this. And then they said, no, you volunteered for this. And he's really upset and under regression. You can hear he's really, really, anxious. And then he said it was like they took like a balloon and they took a pin and he just calmed right down. And he calms right down. And before the regression had started, he said to Yvonne Smith, he said, Yvonne, when I'm under, can you ask me what's with the owls? Why am I so obsessed with owls? So she said, yeah, okay, Mike, I'll do that. So when this pin thing happens, when they sort of calm him down from this anger and stuff, and he's just sort of sitting there, you can hear him, he's just, and then say, so Mike, what's with the owls? Why are you interested in owls? And he goes from this whispering under regression to channeling. And he says, the owls are not important. The owls don't mean anything. The owls are just a symbol. The owls are just a symbol that you put on a door. It's the door that's important. You're in a hallway and you go to the door and you see this owl on the door, and then you go, hey, I wonder what's behind the door. And you open the door and there's this vast unexplored universe there, and close the door. And then there's another door and another owl, and you go from door to door. And what they're doing is they're taking us from door to door to door to door, and they're leading us along this path. And you're identifying more and more about the world. And that's where I think it's coming in. 2 days later, he started the book on the owls. So they had got him. So the UFO is just a symbol. UFO is just a symbol, and it's something that gets you going, because you mentioned before, and this is what it is. Science advances with awe and curiosity. If you are not curious and you don't have any awe about anything, you're never going to investigate anything. You're very comfortable with the way things are. And that's what they're doing. They're shattering your naive reality about how it works. But yet they're not going to give you the whole answer. You got to figure it out for yourself. There's this Jim Semivan, who's this CIA high-level official, the equivalent of a 2-star general, who had an experience with beings in his room and then retires and is now the co-director of To the Stars Academy. And he tells the story. He gets very upset. And he said, they never asked my permission. I'm still upset. Like 25 or 30 years later, or whatever it is, I'm still upset. They never asked me for this. They violated my rights and stuff like that. And I always sort of like to point out at that point, well, he's the guy behind the New York Times article. He's the guy that went to the 3-letter agencies in the United States and said, "Hey, you guys ain't getting this thing out. We're going to get this thing out." Like he was retired. He said, "We're gonna get this out. We're not going to release any classified material, but we're moving this thing out because you guys couldn't do it." And they said, "Yeah, okay, go ahead with it." So he's part of this thing of trying to force disclosure. But if he had not had that experience in his room, he never would have done disclosure. So that's exactly why he had it. So he's blaming them, but in that's how they moved the ball down the field. And most people know, whether you've had paranormal phenomena like you or UFO experiences, whatever, once you've had those experiences, you can't get out of your head. You are no longer in Kansas. You are now in the land of Oz. And you're trying to figure this thing out. And everybody knows that once you get down the rabbit hole, you cannot get out of the rabbit hole. You just keep going.
I've tried to push it away and it doesn't work. It comes back with vengeance. Honestly, there's no point. I've just accepted it now.
Yeah. And then they won't, as Jim Semivan points out, he said, they're there, they tease you, they cajole you, they lie to you, but they will never take you home to meet the family. And that's extremely important, that last part, because that's the whole deal. They're not going to give you the answer. They're going to force us to figure out the answer as well. So they'll even sabotage their witnesses. The same as there's a channeling that was done with Martin Luther, the very famous theologian from the 15th century, where he said, they asked him, "Why doesn't God get off his rear end and tell us what's going on?" And that's where he said, doubt is what drives the whole system. If you don't have doubt, if you suddenly realized all the answers, your soul would develop wings and fly away from the body. And that's the whole thing. They keep us in this whole thing. We come through the river of forgetfulness. So I firmly believe that when you die, you know the answer to everything. And in fact, 40% of all experiencers, UFO experiencers, will state at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. Near-death experience, at 31% say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. Therefore, all the answers to everything are there. It's the ability to get in the field, get the answers, and bring them back. And the way I describe it being done is you have to shut down the rational, analytical left brain. You have to, because that's the thing that's causing the noise in the signal. The signal is there. So you can get trance channelers, you can get mediums or people that are really good at it who are able to shut that left brain down, get in the field, get the answers, and bring them back. And there's even an example. Now it's going to escape me here. Yesterday I got one. Oh shoot! No, it's gone. But that's the whole deal. Is the getting that left brain shut down. Oh no, I know what it is. If you go back even to reincarnation research, if you take even Stevenson's reincarnation research, he had 2,500 kids, mostly in India, who at between the age of 2 and 4 would suddenly remember who they were in a past life. And they would grab this little kid and they would take him and he would go to another town at like 3 years old. He would say, "That's my uncle." And he named these people and he named the streets and stuff like that. And I remember the one kid apparently got 51 out of 55 items right. And it's like the kids can barely talk. Yeah. And he's in another town. He's describing who these people are and how he died. And these people say, yeah, that person did die or whatever. So that's the thing. And the thing is that a child, the right brain develops before the left brain. The right brain develops by 4 years old. So these kids from 2 to 4 or 5 or whatever will remember the past lives. The left brain comes online. Look it up. When does the left brain come online? It comes on about the age of 7. And you can take a look at the reincarnation research. At 7 years old, these kids all suddenly forget who they were. They can remember at 2 and 3 and 4 years old. And that's the whole thing. Once the left brain comes online, then the ego is so invested in the physical world and in the illusion and believing it's the puppet on the stage and I'm in charge here. And it shuts out that left brain, the female left brain. And the other thing is that I point out is that the left brain is almost always wrong. There's the actual research that was done on split brain research back in the 1980s, where they would send a signal to the right brain, signal to the left brain. And these were patients who had the corpus callosum was cut. They had epilepsy, and they would cut the thing that connects the two parts of the brain, and that would stop the seizure from going across the brain. And so they could actually send signals to one part of the brain and then the other part of the brain. So they would send the signal to the right side, the female side, and they would get it to see something, or they'd say to it, get up and walk, or get up and drink the Coke. And so the left brain didn't know what was going on because the right brain the female brain can't talk. So then you would say to the person, so why did you pick up the Coke? Why did you do that? Or why did you get up and walk? Now the right brain, the female brain knows, but can't talk. So it's sitting there, and the left brain has no clue whatsoever of why it got up and walked around or whatever. And every single time the left brain will make it up. It will make up a story. Instead of saying, I don't know, it'll never say, I don't know. It'll just say, oh, I was thirsty, or my legs were getting tired or whatever. It would make up a story. So that people got to remember the left brain. We say we need left brain thinking. We need scientific thinking. We need rational analytical thought. That's exactly the thing we don't need. We've gotten into this problem of naive reality. The earth is flat because it looks flat. You look at it with perceptual reality and you say, it's flat. It's simply flat. And the sun's going around the earth because it looks like it's going around the earth. And things are solid because they look like they're solid. And every time it's wrong, it's wrong. And as we go along, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And the ones that are about to go down the rabbit hole now, the 2022 Nobel Prize was given for the spooky action at a distance. This idea that you take two particles, one in one direction, one in the other direction. If they're entangled, you change the spin of the one, and the other one can be on the other side of the galaxy, and instantaneously it will change its spin. Yeah. And that's this whole idea: is there time and space? There does appear to be time and space. Is there time and space? So you can even go to research that's been done on lucid dreaming. You talked about dreaming. So in Lucid Dream Lab in Stanford University, they would do experiments where they realized you could send a signal back when you're in the lucid dream. And they realized the reason they realized it is one guy when he was in the lab, his eyes were going back and forth and back and forth. And they asked him when he woke up, they said, so what were you dreaming about? And he said, oh, I was watching these guys play ping pong in my dream. And so then they go, oh, good. So then they would tell the people, you go into the dream. When you're lucid in the dream, look left, right, 4 times. That's the signal. So the person would go in, and sure enough, on the screen, they go, blip, 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 blip. Wow. You're sending the signal. I'm lucid now. And they would give them experiments to do. They would give them experiments to say, okay, as soon as you've given us a signal, then give us another signal, then count to 10, then give us another signal. So they would, and of course they would be timing this outside in the lab, and the person would count to 10 in the lucid dream, and then it would be the same. It was the same. There was time in the lucid dream. But the question is, if you're in a lucid dream or a dream, you have time and you have space, but do you have time and space in the dream? No, you don't. It's happening in your head. And that's the perceptual reality. People got to realize it's all happening in your head. There is, as the famous physicist John Wheeler said, there is no out there. This is a participatory universe. And I just wrote a book called UFO Sky Pilots. Mm-hmm. And in that one, I had these 36 people come to me synchronistically. All these people suddenly appear, and they're telling me that they flew the craft. And so I would ask them this thing about flying the craft. And there was some interesting things that they said. One was always, they said the craft was alive. The craft was conscious. It was a conscious human being. And that they would link to the craft by touching something. And what I learned eventually was that nobody told the same story. It was like a dream. Everybody was having the dream of flying the craft, but nobody ever touched the same thing. So one would have a little thing they would put up and down. One would put their hand on a panel. One would put the hand on a guy out of Liverpool had put his hand on a panel on the wall. One would put a hand on a beehive. One put a hand on a ball. One person said that all these different, so they're all different. No two are the same. And then the thing was that they would say, the being would say, like my friend Ron Johnson, who's an experiencer out of Utah, they said, Ron, where would you like to go? He said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. He said, okay, Ron, this will take about 1 second. It'll be very intense G-force. And he's sitting in a chair, and he's got his fingers in the end of his chair. And they said, Ron, just imagine it in your head. That's you've got to go within yourself, go within your mind. And when you can imagine it, we will go there. And other people were told the same thing. And he said, he imagined this, and boom, he said, looked out the window, and there was the Milky Way off in the distance. So the thing is, that was like 50 to 70,000 light years in 1 second. So either there's no time and space, or there's something else wrong here, because there's no way he went 50, 70,000 light years. And people that would fly the craft would say that you could go from here to the other side of the universe, wherever you wanted to go, instantaneously, just boom, like that. And the whole thing is, are they actually on a ship? Is there actually a ship, or is this happening like in the dream? You go in the lucid dream, and you can take people in a lucid dream who are really good at it, who will try to find the fact that it's a dream. So they'll touch stuff and they'll taste stuff and stuff like that. And they'll say they can't find the break. They can't find anything that's different, that it is as real as the real world. And there's no difference whatsoever. So that's the whole thing. Are we in a dream? And that's, I think, where you're going to come down to, is that this thing is all happening. Because I say, if there is no time and space, as the indicators are, how big is the universe? It's just a singularity. There is, as John Wheeler said, there's no out there. But we perceive that there's these planets way out there and stuff like that. And in this sort of dream, it'd be like in the dream world, if you were dreaming. Or another example I'll give you. You have the people who have out-of-body experiences, like near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences. So you float away from your body and you look back at your body and you say, oh, is the consciousness in the brain? And you go, no, it ain't the brain. The brain's down there. I'm looking at the brain. Mm-hmm. The consciousness is floating around the room here. And then you can go and then you realize that the consciousness is not in the brain.
Yeah.
The brain is in the consciousness. And then if you can float to the window in your consciousness and look out the window and you see the stars and planet. Well, are they out there, or are they in the consciousness as well? And that's where we start. I think the UFO phenomenon is starting to indicate to us these ideas that it may all be Maya, like the ancient Oriental traditions teach. It's all Maya. It's all Uli stuff. There's no physical world. And we've started to learn that, with the idea that you break everything down and the atoms are just energy patterns. Everything is vibration. And that stuff is that the paranormal people have been talking about this for 100 years. And then you get these people coming in from science and they come up with the simulated universe theory, and they go and they say, look at this, we discovered this. And it's like, no, this is the bottom of the ninth inning, man. This is almost game over. We knew this a long time ago.
Catch up.
Credit for this simulated universe thing. Well, paranormal people have been talking about this for a long, long time.
It's great. Do you know, it's so interesting because there's definitely been, as you said before, we've been proven wrong many, many, many times, right? And like right now, there's definitely a connection between, and for me as well, because before I was like, oh, I'm having dreams or sleep paralysis or weird things and getting intuitive experiences. It's not UFO related. But as I've delved into this subject, and actually, someone told me years ago that it's all spiritual. And I was like, yeah, I'm done. This was like 6 years ago. I was like, this is strange. I was like, it can't, how can they all be spiritual? I don't understand this. And I pushed it away for a while. And as I said, it came back, and then it's come back with so much information around the consciousness, paranormal side of it. And it really, and I was like, wow, this has come at the perfect time. And the more you look into it, the more it makes sense, because like, especially in terms of how they travel, in terms of how they interact with us, and the fact that science is also, it's becoming quite commonplace now, or there's a much more broader understanding that consciousness is not in our brain, it's an external factor, and in many ways our brain is probably the conduit to interact with it, or the kind of device like an internet modem or something like that. And I think that probably relates to the CFI protocols and stuff like that, when people are able to actually connect or get in a meditative state where they're able to like visibly get craft to come out. And there's some very uncanny examples around that as well. But for me, like the consciousness stuff is definitely a connection to it. And these beings are probably, well, they are like interdimensional. They've got access to something that we are not able to fully go in, because we're so focused on the physical as well. But the physical is not, we may see it with our eyes, but there's a lot more going on behind the scenes as well. In fact, I guess with that, do you think like how some experiences, obviously you've been doing a lot of research into this as well. I'm not sure if we do have an answer on it, but do you think there's a reason why people have more of the paranormal and some maybe see more of the physical, or see more craft in UFOs? Do you think it's more related down to the individual and what would spark that curiosity in them? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it would be like a musical type thing. Some people can't play music like me. Some people can play one or two little tunes. Some people have, 12 years of music. And then you have these savant kids who've never taken a music lesson in their life, can do 8,000 different songs in any key you want and sing and imitate the people's voices and stuff like that. It's this sort of level that everybody has their, it's almost like if you go to the sort of the spiritual idea is we all plan to do stuff. And in the UFO community, that it's actually sort of been accepted, is this idea of the three waves, that we knew the world was going to be in trouble with the atomic bomb and stuff like that. And that there was this agreement on the other side for people to come in and raise consciousness. So there's these three waves of people that are coming in to raise consciousness for UFOs and bring this whole sort of thing in. And that's where you get experiencers who will say, that's my family. These people, I'm linked to these people. There's a thing, or a lot of people, because I have a publishing company that I sort of help people. I show them how to publish their own book and stuff like that, and encourage them and stuff like that. It's all connected, which is the idea. It's all connected. It's all one thing. And so when I say to them, write your book, they at first they're not too sure they can do it. But I always ask them, the people who've done books, when they come to me, Sherry Wilde is an example. She wrote a book called The Forgotten Promise, which is the whole idea. You promised to do this, Sherry. It's almost like Mike Clown. You volunteered for this. Yeah. And she's going, and then she's sitting there at her typewriter one day, and she's not a typewriter. She's sitting at her computer. She wakes up at her computer and she's going, what am I sleeping in front of my computer for? And then she looks and the Word program is open. She's going, I never have the Word program open. Why is the Word program open? And she starts to read it. She's reading. She's going, oh no, we're not going there. And it's her story. And she goes, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do this. And then Da, who's her being, says, oh, no, timing is everything. No, I'm not writing your damn book. She said, no way, I'm not writing your damn book. And then they eventually talk her into doing this book. And she writes this book, and now they tell her she's going to do a movie, and they show this screen. She's driving along the road, and they show this screen, and she's going, I'm driving. Like, what are you showing me this screen for? I can't drive and look at this screen. What is that anyway? And they said, that's the opening scene to your movie. And it's a scene of her as a little girl around this tree. It's kind of an interesting story. But so when experiencers come to me, I always say to them, I say, so did you get help writing your book? And they go, yeah, sort of. And I said, did they want you to do the book? Yeah, they wanted me to do the book. And it's this whole idea that this is this volunteer thing. And I say, are you on a mission? Every experience I ask them, are you on a mission? Yeah. And they go, yeah, I think so. I don't know what it is, but I think so. I'm puzzled. I don't know what's going on. And then some people will say, yeah, I'm on a mission. And they'll tell you their mission, exactly what they're supposed to do. Or people will wake up like Chris Bledsoe, who was for a number of years, 5 years. It was terrible. I mean, it was just, he was praying to God for 9 months for God to take him away. He couldn't take it. It was like just horrible, the reactions he was getting from people around him and like that. And then he gets, the lady takes him, and she says, Chris, you have a burden, and it is yours to carry. And so I said to Chris, I said, do you know what the burden is? And he said, yeah, I know what the burden is. It's the message. I have this message to deliver to the world. And she calls him twice, because the first time he doesn't pay any attention. She calls him back again. He's in outer space the second time. And she says, Chris, you have a burden, and it's yours to carry. And now, Chris, you can't shut the guy up. I mean, he's like coming, he's running around telling people. And that's not how it started. And that's the thing, is when people realize this idea that they have this mission, then they sort of really get involved in what's going on. And get back to the spiritual thing, it's one of the most unique stories that shows how this thing all crosses over is Ron Johnson is doing his book. And I said, Ron, you do your book? And he said, well, I'm editing. And I said, forget it. Nobody reads books anyway. Just do your damn book. Nobody's going to read it anyway. Just get it out, put it out. Yeah. And he still is editing. And I don't know if we'll ever get him to publish the book, but he had the experience where you have this direct crossover with the spiritual aspect. And so he's a Mormon guy, and his mother dies, and then his being, a lot of people, if you talk to the experiencers, the first question you ask them is, what was the name of the being you were dealing with? And then they'll go, oh, it's whatever the name is or whatever. And they're always dealing with one being. They don't deal with all the aliens. There's one person who they're talking to. And then it was sort of like, and I started to get indications, this may actually be a spirit guide. This is not a being. This is a spirit guide playing this role. So his being is called Elby. And so he says Elby takes him to the spirit world 3 times. The first time he's in sort of this dark sort of place, and he can tell that, there's people there, but he doesn't see anything. Second one, he's talking to his dead mother, but he can't see her. And the third one, he's actually in the spirit world with his mother, and he's walking around in this field. And he said, it's as real as the real world. And off in the distance is a little, he said it looked like a temple in some small town in Utah. He named the town, but I can't remember what it was. A small Mormon temple. So he's Mormon. So he sees this temple, and his mother says to him, Ron, when you die, you're going to get a room in this building. And because Ron's got a very bad heart condition. So he said, when you die, you're going to get a room in this building. And I've got a room, and your father's got a room. And he said it was like a portal opened up. In this building, the portal opened up. He could see his father inside this room. And he's going, okay, you know. And so she says, let's go in the building. So he says, my mother and I walk into this temple. And he said, it was the weirdest thing was, Grant. He said, it was like 10 or 100 times the size inside as it was outside. And I go, really? I said, that's kind of weird. That's what the UFO people say when they're inside a UFO. It's 10 times, 100 times the size. It's, it's 30 feet on the outside. It's the size of a football stadium inside. And I'm thinking, so is he in a Mormon temple in the spirit world, or is he in a UFO? And you see these direct crossovers. And then the other crossover he had was one that I think I know more than most people about. And that is, he says, my mother takes me down to the other end of the building, and there's this table, and there's these crystals coming out of the table. I said, crystals? Really? Yeah. He said, yeah. And he said, you look at the crystal at a certain angle, and you can see your whole life. You can see everything that happened, but you don't get the crystals. Mother said, your crystal's not here, Ron, because you haven't died yet. As soon as you die, you have a crystal on this table. And then he said, he looked, and his dog, I can't remember the dog's name was, died in 1972. And he said, he looked, and his dog had a crystal. And he said, oh, I never knew what happened to my dog. His dog just disappeared one day. So he's looking at the crystal, and he's looking at his dog's life. And at the end of his dog's life, he realized that the neighbor had taken the dog, shot the dog, put him in the back of a half-ton truck, took him to the dump yard and threw him in the dump. And I said, oh, really? And the thing is that you get so many crossovers with crystals. If you've studied Life Between Life, Michael Newton, which is one of the big events of my life. I saw him lecture. I didn't want to see him lecture either. And I went into his lecture, and it just changed my life. And he did the Life Between Life stuff where he lets people die. Then he says, okay, what's happening? I'm going through the tunnel. Keep going. And he takes them in the spirit world. What's happening here? And the people describe being in the spirit world and then coming back again. And he does 7,000 people. And in there, he talks about the people that they learn. You plan for your next life. So you're learning. So you're in a big, huge library, and they have these books, and you sit at a table, and you have these books, and you open the book, and there's a crystal in the book. And you look at this crystal at a certain angle, and you can tell your past lives and your future lives. And that's how you plan for your future life, is in this crystal. And then the third one, if you've seen the UFO documentary called UFOs Past, Present, Future, there's the backlit Falcon, the aviary story, the Falcon and the Condor. So the one guy is backlit, and he's the Falcon, the big UFO guy who knows everything. And he talks about the fact that the most amazing thing he ever saw was the crystal. And he holds up this, they have this alien drawing of this alien holding this crystal, and that they could show the past of the world to the U.S. government, and that they had actually shown the crucifixion of Jesus Christ in this crystal to the American government. And so it was exactly the same story. So you see one with this UFO, one with Ron in the spirit world, and one in Life Between Lives. This thing with the crystals of looking at this 45-degree angle, and you can see past lives, future lives, and all this kind of stuff. So that's where you start to see these crossovers. That's why I wanted to do the book on crossovers, where I said, you can say, people will say to me, for example, they'll say, yeah, I don't think I was abducted. I just have these dreams of these aliens all the time. And I say, oh, really? Anything else weird happened in your life? And they go, oh, yeah. And they start talking about their kid, and they're floating out of their body when they were a little kid. And, and they had ghosts in the house and stuff like that. And that's the thing. It's all the same thing where you get these crossovers, and people want to parse it. And if you've interviewed Ray Hernandez, who started the Free Foundation, him and Edgar Mitchell, they did 4,200 experiencers. And Ray Hernandez, the synchronicity happened with him and me was when I had this consciousness download. It was exactly a week later that Ray Hernandez had the event where his wife is praying, and the 15-year-old dog is paralyzed, and they're going to euthanize it. Suddenly gets cured, and it's just like a brand new puppy. And it was during that event he started to pay attention to his wife, for saying she's seeing these ships and stuff with the stained glass windows. And he had his own experience where he was standing outside, and he said, okay, well, if this is for real, I want to see the ships with the stained glass windows that my wife sees. And he's waiting. He's an IRS lawyer, a big IRS lawyer. And he's sitting there waiting for someone to deliver some papers to him or something. And he's 15 minutes. He's sitting there. I knew nothing was going to come. And then he looks, and he said it looked like Wembley Stadium over the neighbor's house. He goes, oh my God, he calls his daughter out. And then the people dropping off the papers coming, they're all standing there looking at this thing the size of Wembley Stadium sitting in the sky. And then he's obsessed. Then he's looking on the internet and he's looking up consciousness UFOs because he made contact with this thing. Consciousness UFOs. And of course, my name comes up. So he contacts me and I say, well, Ray, I'm actually going to be in Florida in a month or two. And I'm going to give this lecture and I'm going to give it on consciousness. You can come and see my lecture and then you can, we'll talk about your experience and see if we can figure this thing out. So he comes. And 2 days after he leaves the conference, he lives in Miami. He lives in another country now, but he was in Miami. He's on the freeway and he's completely stuck on the freeway. There's traffic is stopped. He's listening to NPR radio, which is the big public radio in the United States. And this guy's talking about using body fat to make sculptures. And he's saying, that's kind of weird. And he's listening to this thing. He said, boom, suddenly he's out of his body and he's up. He's in this sort of a world, a different dimension or whatever. And they have this wheel and the wheel is spinning and these beings are there. And he can see psychic phenomena, remote viewing, UFOs, poltergeists, all these different things, like these images. And this wheel is spinning. And these beings are saying, you got to quit parsing this stuff. It's all the same thing. So that's where I did. That's this book I'm about to release. It's I even forgot what the title is going to be. We had to change it. Oh, we're going to call it the Super Bowl. We're going to call it the Super Bowl. But then someone told me I'm going to get sued if I use the word Super Bowl. So then it's going to be called the Big Game. And it's the whole idea that it's all the same thing. That if you start looking at whatever paranormal phenomena you're looking at, you're going to get crossovers to all the other paranormal phenomena. Not all of them. So it's not like everybody has all these abilities, but certain people have things almost like you come in to play a role. Oh, I'm going to play a psychic this time, or I'm going to play a medium, or I'm going to have a UFO sighting or something like that. And the thing was that when I look back on my sightings in 1975, it appeared that it was not random. I really got this idea. This did not happen by accident, because when I interviewed the guy who was taking the film that became so famous, he was telling me, I'm sitting there watching it glow up and down, stuff like that. And then he pushes the trigger and the thing jumps just as he's pushing the trigger. And I'm saying to myself, hey, that was an accident. There's no way that was an accident. And the thing was that if he had not caught that on film, I never would have gone to Carman because I really didn't have any interest in UFOs. That's what dragged me out there. And it was almost like, when was the last time you heard of a UFO getting caught on the ground and being filmed jumping from the ground? It hasn't happened. There's no such film. It was almost like they said, we need Grant to go out there. We need to drag him down the rabbit hole. And so they did this thing that was no doubt that I had to do this thing. I had to go after it because I was so obsessed after I saw that film. I saw the thing the first night and that was it. I said to people, that was it. I wasted the rest of my life. That was my whole life. That's all I did for my whole life was chase this stupid mystery. And yet to me, it's like being in the Super Bowl or like World Cup. I mean, you not only do you know there's a World Cup game going on in London, you are in the stadium. Not only are you in the stadium, you are on the field. And there has to be the curiosity. They can't give you everything, because if you're in the World Cup, say you're playing the final game of the World Cup, and in the Super Bowl, I know in the United States, the average ticket for the Super Bowl is $11,000. And the question is, if you're in the World Cup or the Super Bowl, if the tickets are $11,000 US a ticket, are you going to buy the ticket if you know what the final score is? No, absolutely. Nobody's not going to sell a single ticket. That's the whole thing. So it's this idea.
It's a great example. It's a great example. It's really good. Because I'm a big football fan as well. So I'm like, okay, because there's no point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like how many people watch the replays? Like, people will say, they're working or something and they'll say, we're here. The big thing is hockey. And they'll say, oh, the Jets are playing. Don't talk about the scores. I'm going to watch it when I get home tonight. Because if you tell them the score, they're not even going to watch it when they get home from work. Because that's the idea. And that's the whole idea behind curiosity is they're using these things to drag you into this sort of rabbit hole where you're trying to figure this thing out. And awe and curiosity is what forces people to do investigation. And the more we investigate, the closer we get. But I do not think we'll ever hit reality. If you've watched the stuff done by Donald Hoffman, who's now gotten into this simulated universe thing, he talks about this whole idea that everything is a desktop icon. And the analogy I use, people think, oh, when's the government going to tell us what's going on? Well, the government can't know what's going on because it's so complex. It's like you can take the most simple thing in the universe, which is a single cell amoeba, other than bacteria, but a single cell is an amoeba, one cell. with a a body around it. And if you take a look and you say, well, okay, we got to explain. It's an amoeba. And I said, no. There's an amoeba has 12 quadrillion atoms in it. So that's 12 surrounded the following 18 zeros around it. And so you say, well, you take that and you throw them into a bowl, and then what? An amoeba is going to come crawling out. It's way more complex. How do the 12 quadrillion atoms know which three-dimensional spot to go in at the right time, and how does it produce life? And moreover, an amoeba, the human body has 3 billion base pairs in the DNA. An amoeba has up to 670 billion base pairs. So how does all these random atoms, 12 quadrillion atoms, know how to reproduce the 670 billion base pairs without making a mistake? And you realize it's so complex. Yeah, the more you look at the universe, the more complex it gets, the more complex. And even there was a physicist by the name of David Bohm who said, when we get this quantum physics thing all figured out, it's not going to matter. There's just another level below the quantum physics. And this, no. And that's true. If you look, everything just gets more complex. But we have this and irrational, our left brain tells us there's a final answer. Because we always want the final result. Just tell us what's going on. And so it sort of believes that the government has this all figured out. And I can pretty well assure you that the government may have bodies and crafts. Even Jim Semivan said that. But because you got bodies and crafts doesn't mean you know where they're coming from. Unless the thing's got a driver's license from Zeta Reticuli or something, you don't know where it's coming from. And they may even be lying. If you interview one of these aliens, I remember I don't know if you've interviewed the women in London who are in contact with the beings. Are you familiar with the case with the beings? They call themselves CHON, CHON, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen.
I will reach out to them though. I will reach out to them.
Yeah. So they had the one woman started seeing these beings, and she called her friend to come over. The friend can sense them, can get answers from them, but only the one can see them. And there's these beings. They don't have any faces. They're just little tiny black things, and they don't have any faces or eyes or hair or anything like that. And so they, at one point, they said to me, the woman who's doing the channeling, who was talking to them, said, "Oh, they'd like you to interview them." I said, "Really? Oh, cool." Because I had a couple experiences where I got messages from beings that turned out to be books. They give me messages. I don't get them myself, but they come through experiences. Experiences like Chris Bledsoe said, "Oh, I got a message from the Guardians for you," and I won't get into that. But so these women said these beings want you to interview them. I said, "Oh, great! I'll do that." So she goes into the thing. And I'm not sure if I asked them or somebody else asked them, but it was the ultimate question was, "So, are you extraterrestrials?" And the answer was, it said "Would you like us to be extraterrestrials? we could do that if you want, but no, we're not extraterrestrials." And they said, "We could even take you to our planet, but no, we're not extraterrestrials. We've always been here. You're the visitor." And that's this whole idea. If there's no time and space, how big is the universe? It's all here and now. And you're starting to hear this in UFO experiences where the beings will say, "We've always been here." And where is here? It's just a singularity. It's all a consciousness thing. And we perceive it as vibration, almost like there's a consciousness and it starts to vibrate. And when the vibration starts, that's when the illusion starts, because vibration will create, and we're in a very slow moving vibration, which is physical. They're in a higher vibration. And you'll even get experiences like I did 2 books on Mission Rama, which is a group that it's a Latino group started in Peru, and they do a very religious sort of ceremony. They'll for 2 days they'll do mantras and oming and prayer and stuff, and what they're trying to do is raise the vibration. And then on the last night they have what they call a programmed event where the craft will fly over. And what the craft does is it lowers its vibration. We raise our vibration, and they meet in the middle. And they'll always have very positive experiences because it's a very religious type thing. Whereas if you get people who are in fear, you're going to get gray type experiences. Yeah. So that's where I found that there's these reflective things that when you start looking, it gets more complex, and there is no final answer. There is no thing. The government knows, yes, we are dealing with some sort of intelligence. We've got crash stuff, hardware, bodies, whatever, and we really can't back engineer it. You'll even hear the stories that they put it on the shelf in 1989, and it's just way beyond. It's like giving Leonardo da Vinci a cell phone. Yeah, you're just not going to figure it out, and it's just that much more complex than what we do. And I think the key thing is that you've got the thing that they're missing is we always want to do the reproducible in the lab type thing, which means it's got to be physical. Unless it's physical and we can measure it, but it's not physical. So that's why it's so elusive to measure. And that's the piece we're missing, is this idea that there's a consciousness phenomena. But if you've followed the OSAP story, the guy that ran the OSAP program made a couple of explosive stories in the last couple of months where he said every single sighting was different. They had 200,000 sightings in the database. Every single sighting was different. Exactly like in my craft stories, where the people that find the craft, where everybody touched something different. It was the same story, but it was like a dream. Everybody has a dream, but all the dreams are different. Everybody has an out-of-body experience, but they're all different when you really closely look at them. And so that's the part we're missing, is that spiritual component, and the idea that you really can't measure it, and you've got to talk to the experiencers to put this thing through. And in the end, you're never going to get there, because it just gets more and more and more complex, because whatever you think is what you can develop. And that's the idea that Newton puts out, and a number of people are now putting out, is the idea that God did not create the heaven and the earth. God created the sparks of the divine, and we're creating the heavens and the earth, and we're making it more complex and more elaborate. And God's just sitting on the sidelines watching this thing as we build this universe that has started with just consciousness and this vibration through us. And Michael Newton will even be talking about people in the spirit world, and they say, "What are you doing?" And the guy says, "I'm making a rock." And he says, "You're making a rock?" "Yeah, I'm not that good yet. I'm just starting." And they're using energy to build rocks and plants, and this idea that that's what we do when we're sort of in the spirit world. And if there's actually an experiencer who had a 13-day encounter. Mark Sims was the guy's name. He's sort of disappeared now, but he wrote a book, and he claimed that this being Tejbar was with him for 13 days. And Tejbar told him the whole story of how evolution works and how reality works. It's the same story. It's this idea that it starts very, very simple, and that we build this with consciousness, we build it up, and that if you get to level 15, you have beings that are so powerful, they're actually creating universes. And they're able to create universes. And it depends upon your level of the ability to understand how it works and how to create stuff. And the UFO thing is only a part of it. So they come in and they do their little thing. And then you get people who are coming in and doing mediumship. They're coming in and like dead people trying to raise consciousness. And you get these people channeling, and you get all these different people. And it's all these different perspectives, because it's all individual. You can do what you want. Oh, I got this idea. And that's what I said about the theory of wow, is I said, when you look at all the paranormal phenomena, what it may be is like, whether it's an extraterrestrial or an interdimensional or whatever, it's a class project. So you say to the kids, okay, there's this planet called Earth, and these guys are about to blow themselves up. What should we do to get their attention? The grade 1 class goes, hey, I know what we'll do. Well, let's put some lights on some crafts and fly them around, and then they'll wonder what's going on. And that gets to the idea.
But that's what we'll do with like animals. It's like a cage experiment, isn't it? As well, it's literally like that's why I find it. That's why I'm laughing so much, because it's literally how we would be. And everything you're mentioning is hilarious, from us creating our own universes or these beings. In many ways, the whole journey with anyone who has any sort of paranormal experience, whether it's mediumship or UFOs or whatever, as you start to understand its consciousness, you're also developing your level and you're upgrading your frequency the same way these beings would go through the same process as well, just a smaller level, because we obviously don't have the aptitude to it because of our the kind of logical side of our brain. But yeah, it's all kind of,
it goes on forever. So people they have this idea about, we want the result, we want the answer. They're just curious. That's what Walker told us. You're just curious. Admit it. You're just curious. Why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? And people do. And then it's the same thing with the spiritual world. People will tell me this stuff like, oh, I'm raising my my spiritual level so I can get off the karmic wheel. And I go, really? Well, how does that help anything? So what? You're going to go sit on a beach in Hawaii and drink Mai Tais? How many billion years do you think you can sit there and drink? And that's what people got to realize. It never ends. It never began. It never ends. You just keep getting more and more elaborate and higher and do different things. You're never going to stop doing stuff. People have this idea. We want the end. We want to retire. We want to do this kind of stuff. And it's not going to end. You're going to get over there. And it's like, if your kids were in trouble, if say you die and you go on the other side, and then someone says, hey, your kids are in trouble. You want to go back and help? No, I'm drinking Mai Tais in Hawaii. Get out of here. Leave me alone. Everybody's always going to go back. Nobody gets saved until everybody's saved. You're always going to go back, because that's what we're doing. It's not so much that it's good and bad and we're saving people. It's the idea we're making this universe more elaborate, and the good stuff and the bad stuff is all learning experiences. So you can look back on your past lives, and I died this way, I died that way, I died this way, and this guy stabbed me, and I killed somebody and stuff like that. And you go, well, that's pretty cool. And it all becomes experience. Whereas here we're playing this game like there's an end result, that we're going to end up in heaven, and then we're going to just sit there and listen to people play harps for the rest of eternity, whatever. And
it's the journey, right? It's not the destination. It's the journey, what we're learning through it as well.
Exactly. But it'll never end. And that's the thing. There's no time, there's no space, and it never ends. We just keep going on, and it's all this uli consciousness stuff that or in the ancients had it. The Tao Te Ching said, that's 4,000 years or 3,000 years old. Lao Tzu said, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The Tao is the beginning of heaven. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The Tao is the beginning of heaven and earth, and the Tao is the mother of 10,000 things. And the idea is, what science does, the Tao is just whatever you call it, spirit, God, whatever. The Tao that can be named, what we do is we name it. So it's God, that's this, that's that, and we want to name everything. So it's all one thing. It's all consciousness. It's all connected, it's all alive, and it's all consciousness. And what science does is it comes in, and what's the first thing it does? It names everything. Oh, we got atoms, we got molecules, we got stars, we got planets, and they're just things. They don't have any life. They don't have any meaning. There's nothing. It's just all these random things that have come together. And basically the bottom line is it's all this uli stuff, and there are no nouns. It's all a verb. And what we're trying to do is change it from this live conscious verb to a bunch of nouns, where it's a random meaningless universe of a bunch of nouns. And so to me, it's you got to remember, it's a verb. Everything's alive, everything's conscious, and everything is connected to everything else. And that's what you'll get with people who do ayahuasca, or people near-death experiences, or even the aliens, when they're dealing with the aliens and the high vibration with these aliens. They'll suddenly say, like the musician Sting, when he did his ayahuasca thing, he suddenly said, I realized everything was alive, conscious, and everything was connected. And I was just blown away by this. And then he looked at this little plant coming out of the ground, and he said, oh, that's my brother. And this is this whole idea. But we're getting this spiritual revelation both through psychedelics. I'm just writing a book now called Center Stage, where I talk about different events that were synchronistic in terms of.
How many hands do you have? How many hands? You've written a lot of books.
Yeah, I guess it's I'm working on my 21st now. I just sort of write them because they don't, not many people buy, but you put it up there because that's what I say to people. If you've got a story, the onus is on you to write it down.
Yeah,
it doesn't help you. It's like the Bible says, what profiteth a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? So what? You figure it out. It doesn't help anybody. You got to put it down, even for your kids, to realize why father was such a crazy guy. They read the story, and my son's not interested. He's never read any of my books or whatever, but at least it's there for history for other people. So that's sort of what I've done, is just put it out. And I encourage other people to put it down, to be interviewed, because what you'll find is people will say, oh, I really don't want to talk about my experience, whatever. And I have these, what I call them rabbit holes. So I bring in all these experiencer people come on. Sometimes there's like 90 people or whatever on, and they basically tell their story, and they sit with you. You can turn your camera off. You can turn your audio off, and you just sit there and watch, which is the point. And when it's time for you to speak, then you'll speak. But what you find is, once the person tells their story and nobody laughs, and then they go, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then you can't shut them up. And then they start telling their story. And that's the way it works. You got to get people out of that. And that's how psychotherapy works, is what you do is you revisit the situation. You get the person to talk about the situation, and they see it in a new light. They see it in a different way, and they go, oh, that wasn't so bad. Nobody killed me. I didn't die or whatever. Yeah. And they get over it. So that's what the phenomena is trying to move us along. And it may actually be us. You never know. I mean, if it's all one thing, it may be us, because the one thing analogy I always use is the idea that people want to separate things. They want to do the name, the Tao. So they say there's this and there's that, and so you get what we are. In my analogy is, we're at the bottom of the sea, and it's really, really dark. We're down in the bottom of the sea, and we can't see anything, and we're sort of floating around. And from time to time, someone learns how to channel or do mediumship or have an out-of-body experience, and they sort of float a little higher into the water. And the higher you get in the water, the more light there is. And suddenly they look around and they go, huh, there's fish here. There's fish. And then they say to the fish, hey, what level am I on? And the fish says, what are you crazy? There's no levels. You're in the water, you idiot. There's no levels, but we want to put levels. There's multi-dimensionals, and there's 8 dimensions, and there's different colors. And no, there's nothing. It's just water. You're in the water. And the closer you get to the light, the more the higher you get in your vibration, the more you can see. And then you go back into the darkness and you say, hey, I saw some fish. Get out of here. There's no fish. And that's what's happening. Is it's just this perspective of where you are, but you got to share your perspective, put it down to educate the people on the bottom. And when they're ready to go for it, or if you realize that we are living in the biggest story of all times, the Super Bowl or the World Cup or whatever, you realize that 2,000 years from now, everybody's going to think we're the luckiest people in the world. Man, those people were there when it actually.
I know. I feel honored. You know, something. Yeah. I mean, this whole subject can drive you crazy a little bit, but because there's a lot of question there. But I feel honored and privileged that. I mean, that's what really helped me to understand. Because I was like, 1 minute, we've been around for however long we've been around, and just by chance right now there's all this stuff happening and I'm having these experiences while other people are as well. Thank you. Like, really, like, could I be one of the luckiest people right now to look back in history? And that's why I started this podcast. I was like, I need to get this out there as well. I want to, if I can contribute 0.0000001% to this and something like that, then I'm happy with that. And that's why I wanted to, because I do feel like, I mean, I flip between it, but it's definitely, we could be the lucky ones right now, and everyone's they're doing their own part of it to help raise awareness, raise the level of consciousness. And as you said, people might not be ready right now, but in 100 years' time, I mean, to be fair with you, Grant, I mean, when David Grush came out at the Soul thing, it was like, we're going to have a spiritual thing. For me, I was like, okay, this is moving to that level right now where people are really starting to understand on kind of like internally that this is not just a physical thing. There is a consciousness, there is a spiritual element. And when I heard that at the Soul Foundation, when he popped on the Zoom call and he said that out loud, I was like, this is pretty incredible for him to be saying that around there as well. So I think it's definitely going up, but we're all just contributing it. And I think we should all be honored and share it as well, which I'm still struggling to do, by the way, but in time as well. But it's definitely a good time to be alive.
Because we always want to play the victim. That's what I always say. So we change it from the fact that you got to play in the game. We want to change it to the victim. Is why are they withholding it from me? This is terrible. The government should tell us we pay taxes and all this kind of stuff. And that we are these victims. And I remember I'd be at this big conference again, and they started this thing, which where I got the idea for the rabbit hole. Is in the beginning of the morning, like the lectures would start at 9:30 in the morning, but at 8 o'clock in the morning, they would have the experiencer meetings, and they would be in the back room in behind the stage, and people would go there. And it was like these people come from all around the country because their friends and families wouldn't believe anything they were saying. And this was their chance to tell their story. And these people would be in this room, like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and they would all be talking about their experience and stuff like that. And people would be crying and really emotional, and they all knew each other and stuff like that. And I remember they were sitting there, but you go into the victim mentality. I remember I was in there, and it was stacked. There was 2 rooms, 150 people in these 2 rooms. And they said, well, there's no chairs. You got to stand. I said, okay, I'll stand. It's no problem. So I went in there, and they were going, and then they got into the victim thing. Like, oh, it's so terrible. These people, nobody cares about us. They have the lectures at 9:30. All they worry about is the speakers, and nobody cares about us in the back room here. And I go, hey, can I say something? And so then Yvonne says, yeah, Grant, what do you want to say? I say, hey, I'm a speaker here. I'm back here. It's not that all the speakers are ignoring you guys back here. And I said, you got to remember, you are in the Super Bowl of all stories. You guys are the ones that they're dealing with, and you should realize that you've got the answers, and that most of the people out there really don't know what's going on, and that you've got this thing, and you could see them, they're sort of sitting up in their chairs, like they suddenly realize, yeah, this is true. But you start to feel sorry for yourself, and you start to victimize yourself instead of realizing this is just experience. That if you look at it from the outside, that you go to the idea that it may be all like this idea that Bashar says, that there are no coincidences. This is all happening according to you going down a hallway, and you can go down the hallway any way you want, but you're going down that hallway, and the idea that you realize that you may have had part of this. And so even if it's not true, if you take the assumption that whatever happens to me today, I planned it, and you take responsibility for it, because everybody knows, any psychologist will tell you that until you take responsibility for what happened to you as a child, getting molested or whatever it is. Until you take responsibility for it and quit being a victim, you're not going to be cured. And that's the whole deal, is to take responsibility that maybe I didn't create this thing, but you will make a better decision if you say, I had something to do with this. Then you take responsibility and you get out of that victim mentality. The victim mentality is, and we're doing this thing, and I think the government does that. I make this joke. People say, "Oh, the Illuminati and they're threatening us and stuff." I said, "Hey, I've been in this field 49 years. I'm a Canadian. I don't even have constitutional protection. If the Americans want to knock me off, they can knock me off anytime they want." And I dealt with the president, Penn State University president. I went after Pandolfi, Kit Green, all the CIA guys. And if anybody they wanted to knock off, it'd be the guy going after the president of the United States. And they've left me alone in terms of doing my sort of stuff. And what they want, I believe, is they play this role. They drop this stuff into the UFO community about the Illuminati and the dark forces, and there's somebody running the government, and the government has no control, because they want you to do that. They want you going down some dark alley looking for the Illuminati, because then you're gone for life. They don't have to worry about you anymore, because you're never going to find the Illuminati. There is no secret people that are on the top of this thing, and that's this victim thing. It's the idea that I say that the government really doesn't know any more than you and I, and that in there you have these high level guys who are trying to figure it out as well. But if you get off on the road that there's some sort of 33-degree Mason that is running the show, and you're going to spend your whole life doing that instead of talking to the experiencers, who are the people who are interacting with the phenomena. They ignore the experiencers all the time. They want lighting sights, lights in the sky, and that comes down to this theory of wow, is why do they put lights on the craft? So you can see them. Doesn't mean anything. When I saw the second night, when I saw it, the thing that inspired me the most to go do something was I was looking at the second night. I was just flying away, and I'm going, that's so cool. That could be an extraterrestrial. And then I thought, but what's it doing? It's not doing anything. And then when I would ask people for sightings, they'd say, oh, I saw this thing. It was hovering above the car. I said, so what was it doing? It wasn't doing anything. It was just there. I said, do you think it saw you? Yeah, I think so. Do you think it knew you saw it? Yeah, I think so. Do you think it wanted you to see it? Yeah, I think so. And it's like, and it's the whole idea. And you get these things and they aren't doing anything. And that's what I say to people, like they just want you to see it, or like, whatever it is, the crop circles. Like, why would you come across the universe and put crop circles down? They want it because nobody's going to figure it out. It's like they're hoaxes, they're whatever. But everybody goes, holy, how the heck do you do that? And that's that awe and curiosity that it moves you, and who knows who's doing it. And the same as cattle mutilations. I remember I was talking to Linda Howe, and I said to Linda, hey, Linda, you know why they take every last drop of blood out of the cow? Why? I said, because they want you to go and investigate it. If there's blood in the cow, and if there's not these very, clean cuts and stuff like that, and if they don't take out they take the heart out of the cow without interfering with the heart sac. That's how they get the heart out, or they take the pregnant cow, they take the fetus out without pulling it out and stuff like that. They do that because they want you to go, what the heck's going on? They want you to investigate. They want you to take pictures. That's why they do this horrible thing, because they want you to bring the camera and they want you to take pictures. And everybody goes, can you see that cow? What are they doing? What's going on? And then suddenly, as you get farther down the road, you go into the theories of David Perkins, who has the biggest collection of cattle mutilations in the world. And he says it's all downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. And then you go, oh, that's what's going on. This is a sign. And you may not know what's going on, but the government goes, did you see where they did that cattle mutilation? They know what's going on, and that's the whole thing. It's this monitoring operation, and they're sending signals. So that's this whole idea of the theory of wow, is there's the grade 3 class comes up with cattle mutilations, and the grade 2 class comes up with crop circles, and they're doing all these weird things. But as Jim Semivan says, they're never going to take you home to visit the family. They're never going to get the final thing. They just plod you along to the next road, and that's fine, because you're learning as you go along. And we develop to realize the world is not the way you think it is. It is not random, meaningless thing of particles banging into each other. It's much more complex. That's what they're trying to tell us.
Absolutely. And like the whole thing, and I think we are, as I said, there's been a process of us starting to understand this more and more. We still got some time. in terms of trying to, I wouldn't say the word convince, because some people have to kind of figure it out themselves as well. They need that little spark to be like, well, this is interesting, and it could be from many different areas as well. But hopefully on the right path. Speaking of,
but you got to remember in that point, you got to remember that if I had not had that experience in 1975, if you had not had your paranormal experience, you and I might just be as stupid as the rest of them. It's the experience that changes. People don't get moved by argument. They get moved by experience. When you have an experience, and that's why they're doing the experience thing. Or you sort of think that you're going to convince people. And I know after 49 years, it's a total waste of time. Just mark down what you're doing. And the people who need to hear it will hear it, because Max Planck talked about that. And here's the guy that developed quantum physics. And what did he say? I mean, we think we're being upset. We were being oppressed because we're UFO people and paranormal people or whatever. And Max Planck, who developed quantum physics, said, you do not convince your opponent by showing him that he's wrong. Science advances one funeral at a time. They die out, and the new generation is not offended with the idea. And that's what happens, is eventually we're going to get there. And even if we don't get there, like people are saying, oh, you know, they're warning us, we're going to blow up the world. No, I don't think that's it. Even if we blow up the world, we just make another world. It's all going to be experience, whether it's good experience. People just want the good experience. They confuse UFOs with Santa Claus. It's not Santa Claus. They're not giving us stuff. They're just showing us things. And whatever we do, we're going to learn from it, or we're not going to learn from it. And the bad experiences usually teach us more than the good experiences.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And do you know what? I think that's something I wanted to kind of figure out, because there's this thing around, are they good or bad or what? And I just think it just is. I think there's good and bad in pretty much everything, firstly. But I think in terms of the experience itself, me personally, I always found it quite, even though some of them were quite strange, I found it exciting. It made me curious. I wasn't really one that was scared of it in many ways. I'd wake up feeling pretty profound. But I know some people have some really negative ones as well. I mean, what's your thoughts? Do you have an idea?
I have lots of thoughts on that. You go to Bashar. That's when you get to the channelers, who I think there's 3 or 4 really good channelers who have pretty direct signals, I think. And basically, there is no good and bad. There is just experience. Yeah. That when you what you have is, the way I describe it is, everything that is considered to be evil in the modern world is created by one thing and one thing only: the mistaken belief in separation. So things that are negative are things that separate and divide. Things that are positive are things that build. So the right brain is the female brain. The female brain is the positive brain. That's the one that says, let's all be together. Let's have a family. Let's get married. And the left brain is, let's just have sex and go on with our life. And so the positive is trying to build. Let's build buildings. Let's build a big world. The left brain, which is the ego, me versus you, separation, I'm the good guy, you're the bad guy, is saying, no, let's bomb the shit out of your buildings. And so it's either separation or collectiveness, putting it together. And if you're going in one direction, you're dividing things, and you're going to have more negative experiences. So it's not like that there's going to be any world you're going to be sent to heaven or hell or whatever. You're going to put yourself in a hell situation. People will describe running into these people in these worlds where they're talked about, they've separated themselves from everybody else, and they're in agony and they're in pain. And once you tell them where they are, and you get them to go towards the light, and you can move them that way, that it's all separation versus oneness. If it's separate, that's when everything is you versus me, wars, ends justifies the means, the political thing where it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you get in power, all these kind of things. And the positive thing is, let's make a better world. Let's make big buildings and beautiful buildings and stuff like that. And what you see is, that's why I say in the 4 things I say about the UFO phenomenon, the one is, there's not a hint of capitalism. You will never see an alien with jewelry on. They say, oh, they're here to steal our gold. They don't have jewelry. They don't have a toilet on there. They don't go to the bathroom. They don't eat. Most of them don't have clothes on. And they're minimalist. They don't have anything. They're just doing this job. They're building. They're making things better and stuff like that. But they're not taking anything from anybody. And that's where I get into the whole idea about even aliens, where I say, you got to question whether it's aliens, because if you take a look at David Jacobs when he had the beings, the people would do this where they do this mind scan where the alien goes right close to the eyes, and then David Jacobs says, "Can you feel him breathing?" No, he's not breathing. And then you start looking, and I say to people when I do experiences, I always ask different questions. People will say, if they're into the fear thing, they'll say to the people, "Hey, so what'd they do to you? Did they hurt you? Were you scared?" And the questions I ask is, "You're on the ship. You're at the being." "Yeah." I just ask you a question. "Do you have any clothes on?" And they go, No, I don't think I didn't have any clothes on." They say, "Didn't I think that's kind of weird? Didn't have any clothes on?" And they go, "Yeah." And they're coming to think of it, that's kind of weird. And I say, "Hey, do you have any nipples, or do you have a belly button, or do you have sex organs?" "No, I don't think so." I said, "You don't think that's kind of weird? That it's a physical, biological being. It hasn't got sex organs?" And they go, "Hey, that is kind of weird." And then you start looking. They have no wrinkles. Their skin looks like it's plastic. They don't have any mouths. They don't eat, like they just have a slit. They don't really have a nose. They have a mouth. And you're going like, what are you? And this, you have to stop and say, what are you really looking at here?
Yeah.
And that goes back to a story that Michael Newton tells. I always like to tell a story. Michael Newton tells a story where he regresses people. So then he regresses them to their past life. He lets them die, takes them to a spirit world, and then brings them there. And he says, okay, you're coming out of the light or whatever. And this one guy in his last lifetime was a fire and brimstone preacher. So Michael Newton says the guy's coming out, and he says, "Okay, so what do you see?" And he goes, "Oh my God, it's the devil!" Michael Newton says, "The devil? Really? You seen the devil? He's right in front of me." He says, "Well, what's he? You sure?" He said, "Yeah, he's standing right in front of you. You can't see him. He's standing right in front of me." And then he says, "So, what's he look like?" "Oh, he's got leathery skin, and he's got horns, and he's got fiery red eyes." And then Newton says, "Really? So, what's he wearing?" And he goes, "Huh? I can just see from his shoulders up. It's not really. It's sort of like smoke. I can't really see anything below there." And then Michael Newton says, "Go to the future and tell me who this really is." And because it's not what he thinks it is. And he says, "Go to the future and tell me what this really is." And he goes, "Oh," and he names, I can't remember what the guy's name was. His spirit guide. "He did it to me again. He's always doing this to me. He does this to me every time. He's wearing a mask. He's wearing a mask of he's scaring me of Satan." And then Newton says, "Well, why would he do that to you?" And he says, "Oh, he's just trying to make a point. He's trying to make a point." He says, "Now you know what it's like to sit in your congregation and listen about fire and brimstone." The idea, the soul guy comes across and he's teaching him a lesson. And it's so when you see the being, and I go through a whole list, it's unbelievable how many things there are about beings that would say it can't be a biological being. It's going through a wall. It can't be a biological being. It doesn't have sex organs. That doesn't have clothes and stuff like that. And then you say, well, who is this really? Who are you really looking at? And one of the interesting things with the crossovers was, again, Jim Semivan, who's the top level CI guy, is talking about he's in this regression, a non-regression. He's relating back to what the beings were. They look like the Michelin men, and and then the guy's trying to get him to talk, and he says, "Well, I really don't talk. They're still working on my case. I really don't want to talk about what I saw and what my wife and I experienced and stuff like that." And so the interviewer, James Ian Dolly, says to him, he's sort of frustrated. So he tries one more shot to get something out of this experience. He says, "So, was there any telepathy?" And then Jim Semivan says, "Yeah, that was the weirdest part." He said, "I was standing there, and these beings were there, and he said there was somebody behind me." He said, "I don't know if it was a gray or a reptilian or a tall white. There was somebody standing behind me, and it had this guardian type thing going on about it." And I went, "What? Are you kidding me?" So I said to James Ian Dolly, "Hey, contact him back. Ask him, was this guardian type thing on his right side or his left side?" Because if you go to Michael Newton, you see that when you die, according to Michael Newton, 8,000 to 7,000 people all tell the story that when you die, you go in front of a council of between 3 and 12 people, and they ask you only one question: how'd it work out? Because you planned it. You planned the whole thing. It's nothing was random. You planned it. And then the person always says, "Oh, I could have done better. I forgot to do this. I was going to do that," and all this kind of stuff. And the spirit guide stands behind you on your left side. So when Michael Newton says there's this being behind me, so then I started asking people, and I didn't get to ask the question when I talked to people flying on the ship, but I started to ask people after. I asked Whitley Strieber. I said, "Hey, Whitley, I'm getting all these stories," because there was a U.S. Air Force retired colonel who told the same story. He said there was these beings behind me, and they were telling me what to do. I wasn't allowed to turn around and look at them. I don't know if they're humans or they're aliens or what they were, and they were telling me what to do. So I said to Whitley, I said, "Hey, Whitley, got all these stories about people being on the craft, and there's somebody behind them, and they can't see them, and they're telling them what to do." I said, "Ever happened to you?" He said, "All the time." And he said, in fact, he says, he got the chance to, he thought it was like flying the craft. And he's sitting at the panel of this panel board, and he's sitting there, and then he thinks to himself, "Man, I'd like to steal this thing." And he said behind him, we could hear someone laughing. Telepathically laughing. And so you start seeing these really weird crossovers of this whole thing, but it's all this play thing. If you start looking across the literature, it's like the Michael Newton thing. You come in and you get choices of two bodies or whatever. Do you want to be this or do you want to be that? And you choose to come in and do this and that. So we have to take responsibility for what we do. And the fact that however you're going to die, you're going to die. And that when things happen to you, if you take responsibility and say, I probably had something to do with this, then you're going to get it, because you're going to get kids who are in grade 12 high school. They have the same experiences. One commits suicide and the other one thinks it's the greatest thing in the world. It's how you deal with what's going on around you. And if you take a look at the alien thing, that's when you start seeing Kit Green, who is the CIA contract guy, who, if you have an experience as a general, you have an abduction type experience as a general or, high level government official, they send you to Kit Green. And Kit Green determines, are you crazy, or did the Russians brainwash you, or have you been abducted? And Kit Green will say that you can have people in the same experience see two different aliens. You see what you believe. And that's what you start to see, where I show the Mission Rama, this very sort of spiritual, religious group. There's 25,000 around the world where they do these C5 protocols. I say, I defy anybody to show me a Mission Rama where they saw a gray or a reptilian or a mantid. Absolutely not. They're these beings that come out of the Bible with this beautiful hair, and they describe them as Michael Phelps was the big swimmer in the United States who won all the gold medals. This muscular guy with this tight suit on and stuff like that. And that's the whole deal, is you manifest what you believe. And that's how it works. And so people who are in fear, even at the end of his life, John Mack came with this idea that if you're in fear, you're going to see a gray. If you're very sort of high energy, sexually motivated, you're going to see a reptilian. And mantid, I can't remember what the mantid is, but that's the idea, is that you will see whatever that you take responsibility for what you're seeing, and that you can get experiences like and this comes to this Lukatsky saying all sightings are different. There was the particular sighting which sort of proves it, is they're at Skinwalker Ranch, and these are military government people, and they got the Gen 3 night vision goggles, and they're sitting there and they're waiting for something to happen or whatever, and this object comes over the ridge and flies right past them over Skinwalker Ranch, and they're sitting there and they all pull out their Gen 3 glasses and they're watching this thing fly by. End of the night, they all compare notes and everybody saw something different. That's where you get this idea. It's happening in your head. People believe there's an out there, and that's what John Wheeler said. There is no out there. There is no out there. This is a participatory universe. We are part of what we experience. And he did the experiment. He did the delayed choice experiment, where you can actually change the past, or this idea that you can change the past and the future, and it's all one thing. And that's where we're gradually and we're sort of on the leading edge, you and I, in terms of understanding that there is this weird part of the universe where we're being taught things, and it's not the world you think it is. And other people are in the world where it's very straightforward, nuts and bolts. And when their time comes, they'll learn it. They're learning their lessons at a different level, because you come in to learn lessons, and we're not all learning the same lessons. And so enjoy the fact that you got to play this game. I always say you could have been an untouchable in the streets of Calcutta and spend your days in a junkyard looking for something valuable enough to sell for food for tomorrow. You didn't get that. You got to play in the Super Bowl, man. And just get over it, and let's move on. And when you see it that way, then you are more optimistic, and you're more encouraged to do stuff, instead of sitting there and whining. Because as long as you're in a corner whining and crying about how unfair it is and why I didn't get to be a channeler, or why I don't get to see a UFO or whatever, then you don't get anywhere when you're in a victim thing. It's only when you're curious and see the awe of this thing, and you get excited. And that's what Bashar says. That's how his rules, his 4 rules. Live at your highest excitement. without any expectation of the end result. And then the synchronicities will start happening and you'll go down that road. But you control your future. You control where you're going and where you end up.
Yeah, I mean, this has been very helpful for me, by the way. Like just in general, just in general, I'm sure loads of people will take solace from this as well. But because I'm still, I mean, I've experienced stuff my whole life, really, and only the last, I guess. I'm going to flip gears very quickly. You talked about the reflective nature as well, and it's very interesting you say that because when I was younger, I used to wake up with a lot of scratches and physical marks and stuff. And
Oh,
the
wow.
last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years or so, since I've kind of accepted it and I've come to it, I haven't that stuff has stopped.
Yeah.
So I think that might be something in terms of it where I was scared of. I remember I used to sleep with my back away from the window and stuff like that because I was like really scared of what was
Yeah.
going on.
Michael Talbot, you should read. I don't know if you've read his book. He's been dead for a number of years, but Michael Talbot talked about that, having these paranormal experiences in his life. And he talked about the fact that when he was in a bad mood, the phenomena, oh no, when he was in a good mood, the poltergeist phenomena would take his socks and hang them off the plants. When he was in a bad mood, he woke up and he'd find needle marks and cuts in his arms. And he
Wow.
realized there was his mentality, his attitude towards it affected the whole thing. And so that's an important sort of point. And he would talk about, how somebody tried to put a hex on him and stuff like that. And he had this experience and he suddenly realized, oh no, I'm going to control this thing. And this orb is sort of coming towards him, challenging him or whatever. And he said, no, I'm in control of the situation. And the thing just backed away like it was afraid of him. And that's the whole thing. We control our experiences, and that's where you got to take responsibility for what it is. Because as Michael Newton says, when you are in front of this council at the end of life, it asks you how did it work out, and you can't say, Hillary Clinton, the dog ate the homework, and my mother-in-law, and the government, and they're going to go time out. This is not about you. This is about you. It's not about them. They live their life, and how did you react? How did you do it? Because whatever happens to you, that people want to believe that there's things out there that are affecting them, that are making them sad or miserable or whatever, and we control it all. And that's the whole idea behind when Michael Newton says that people all say that they have responsibility for it, and they realize that they encouraged it or they brought it on, that there are no synchronicities. So yeah, that's an extremely important point to remember.
Absolutely, yeah, wise words. And I think since I've kind of jumped into this in the last few years as well, I've started to learn synchronicities, and I've really just followed my gut. That's all I've done. If something pops up 3 times or 2 times for me, I've just went with it. And it's gotten me to a stage. In fact, I was in a weird. You see behind me, there's a little thing there on the wall where my pen is. My dad gave that to me about 7 months ago, and I was a bit like, what do I do? I've done some public speaking. I was a bit confused. He went, hey son, look, I've just found this in Nan's drawer. And I looked at it, and he was like, yeah, you've done this on your 8th birthday. He was 8 years old, 7 years old, and he gave it to me, and I was like, it just hit me like crazy, and I was like, that's what I was experiencing as a kid. That's what I was interested in. When you're young, you're just drawing and stuff like that. Both pages filled up completely with it. And that hit me, that kicked me into gear. And I've always been interested in this subject, but when that happened, I was like, okay, I'm going to do something with this now. And I just went with it. So that was a massive synchronicity for me, and it felt intuitive as well, completely.
Yeah. And that's the idea, is when you have the synchronicities, you realize you're on the right path. When the synchronicities tone down and stop, that's when you're starting to overthink it. And that's why I say to people, don't use the left brain. It's just going to lead you down the wrong path, because you're trying to figure this out and trying to analyze it or whatever. You just try to shut that left brain down, wait for your higher self or whoever to give you a synchronicity, to give you a direction. And that, according to the top people, I think is how the game is played.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, listen, we could speak for another 7 hours, but I think we'll leave it, leave it there. I was going to say, just before we do finish, Grant, have you got when's your new books coming out and stuff?
I'll eventually put them within the next maybe 3 months. I'll put out 2 books on disclosure. And now there's a 3rd book I'm starting, because they're about to drop some more material. I can't really say too much because it's not really my story. I'm working with a film producer, but I have the idea that they keep doing this drip thing, that they use people like Disney and Bob Emenegger and Tom DeLonge and Gresh and all these people to drop stuff, and they're dropping some more stuff. It's happening actually. What's today? Today's the 8th. It's going to happen on the 10th. It's not me in the meeting, but this is pretty big story. Whether it goes, no matter how it goes, it's going to be an incredible book, because we know who the people are. We know what we don't know what they're offering yet, but we know that they're making this move to put some more material out. So I'm putting that book out. Then I'm doing this one on the connections between all the different paranormal phenomena, and that they can get that all at my website. Is It's All Connected Weebly. If they just go with It's All Connected, one word, and books, they'll see all the books I'm doing. And my Facebook site is Presidential UFO, and I usually put my up-to-date material of what I'm doing. I'm doing a cruise, contact cruise, going out of Seattle. That's about the only lecture I'm doing, out of Seattle to Alaska in September, where you're going to have sky watches on this cruise and lectures, and Richard Doty's going to be on there with me, and Jimmy Church and different people like that. So that's basically what I'm up to. But I'm just busy trying to record everything as fast as I can, because there's so much stuff happening that I realize, I'll eventually get the books out, but not many people read books anyway. Most people do what you're doing. And that's the idea of doing podcasts and stuff like that. That's where, or Twitter or Facebook, that's where people are going. I actually did the study. A child between the age of 2 and 4 has an attention span between 4 and 6 minutes. Somebody on the internet, look it up, 8.25 seconds. Because people are scrolling. They're scrolling and scrolling through. And so you got to get these short things where people are listening to podcasts while they're walking around, or you put it on Twitter and Facebook where they can get it for a couple of seconds. Oh. That's all you're really going to get. Most people don't read books anymore and stuff like that. They just don't have time, or they're just, it's a different world. It's a cell phone world, and you got to adapt your world. So good for you for starting your podcast and moving in that direction, because that's the way the world is going. That's where people are getting their information, and that's how we're going to raise the consciousness. So thank you for what you do in terms of raising consciousness.
No, thank you. And listen, it's been a really fantastic conversation. It's been right up my street as well. There was loads more stuff I wanted to go through, so maybe we'll have to arrange something at a later stage when you've got a bit of time to touch on some stuff. But thank you once again. And viewers, make sure you do check out Grant's work. I'll leave all the information in the description and stuff. Grant, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.